Hello, and welcome to Secrets of the Pact Worlds panel. I'm Rob McCrary. I'm the creative director for Starfinder.
I'm Jason Keeley, a Starfinder developer focusing mainly on the adventure paths.
And I'm Joe Piscini, a Starfinder developer working on the hardcover line and some other cool things.
Yeah.
So we're here to talk all about the Pact Worlds and answer your questions about the core setting of Starfinder. And we'll start with a secret that not many people know about, which is we have the planet Castrovel, which is the second planet from the sun. Most people say Castrovel, but in fact its real pronunciation is Castrovel because everyone on Castrovel has a Russian accent. So totally canon. You can find it written in every book. It's that's a huge secret.
Right. It's spelled the same. That's why it's written the same.
That's right. It's Castrovel.
And Akaton, I'm going to leave you with the one that I don't
don't
have. I won't take it. We'll say that Abalon is pronounced Abayon. Because of the double L.
And Akiton is Akiton. And everyone there has a
Southern accent.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like an Old West.
It's one big Old West planet.
Yeah.
100% accurate secrets right here.
director.
Okay. So does anybody have any questions they want to first bring up about the Pact Worlds? Any questions you have about the setting or anything, whether it's specifically about that or how we work on it or... No questions.
Start telling stories then.
Start telling stories about the different things of the Pact Worlds. Yeah, we may need to give it a few more time. Well, what about? Is there a favorite part of the Pact Worlds that you have?
Okay.
What about Jason? What about you?
I think my favorite part might be the diaspora, just because there's so many different things, and space pirates are cool. Just the idea of that weird river that runs throughout. That's something that's not in a lot of other sort of asteroid belt kind of things. And knowing that there's some mysteries there, and will we ever solve them? I don't know.
What's up with that river anyway?
What is up with that river? It's weird.
Secretive.
So secretive.
We did go into the diaspora worm a little bit for an upcoming book.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in that. That's a secret we won't reveal it here.
Well, that's fun because I remember actually writing the original, basically half a page of text about the diaspora for the core rulebook and trying to think of some fun name for those things. And I was like, oh, we'll just, it was in quotes, so it wasn't necessarily that full name. I was like, diaspora worms, because they're not quite dragons, they're sea serpents. I kind of wanted to have that flavor to them, and hopefully and then I let it out into the world, and everyone took
did not ask you to write that.
Exactly. That's fine with me. I'm comfortable with that.
Aaron, did you have a question there?
Yeah. Well, we'll let the Twitch stream catch up. But there's questions. I was going to say, well, yeah, you could talk about the Pact Worlds 101 just to jog people's memories, but. Questions are coming in.
All right.
So now, oh goodness, my pronunciation is going to be terrible.
We'll correct you.
Yeah, right. Okay, so question about the Starstone. Can the test of the Starstone still be attempted now that it's at the core of Absalom Station, or does security frown on that? Maybe yes and, I don't know.
Well, that's an interesting question. That's one of the legends of, because in Pathfinder there is the test of the Starstone where you can become a god. Those legends still exist in Starfinder, but security doesn't really have much to do with it because during the gap, everyone on Absalom Station forgot all of the access codes to get to the Starstone. So not even station security can get to access the actual Starstone reactor which powers the station and everything. So that is kind of a mystery of the setting a bit. It seems like if you could potentially become a god thousands and thousands of years ago, it would still work if only you could get to it. But so far, no one has figured out how to actually access the Starstone.
Have many tried? Have some tried?
The gap
Probably.
is a
Well, in the 300 years since
sure.
the gap,
Yeah.
probably, right?
There's a locked door. You're going to try to hack it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Someone's going to try
There's like automated defense systems too, I
Yeah.
think, though. So it's
No one has done it yet.
it is difficult to do that.
All right. What is the enclave of Noir? N-U-A-R. Noir.
N-U-A-R.
Doing on Absalom Station?
It's the full and straight up answer to that is because of Owen Casey Stevens and the largesse of Rob giving him basically to do something that he was very excited about and to throw an Easter egg back towards original Absalom on the Isle of Kortos.
I was an editor when the Starfinder core rulebook was being done, and I remember in the first AP, and we had a little article, of course, on Absalom Station and the stat block that tells you the percentage of population and everything. And I was doing this many humans, that makes sense. Okay, 1% Nuar, what is that? And like looking everywhere in our files, like, I don't know what a Nuar is. And I went to Owen and Robin was like, this isn't in the game. And I'm like, oh, it is.
It will be.
I was like, I'll leave it. All right.
And that goes back to Pathfinder when the original Absalom book, the City of Secret. No, that's Karamaga. The original Absalom book, which
City of the Center of the World.
But that wasn't what the subtitle
The Big Apple.
was.
The Big Apple.
Whatever.
The Big
But
Windy.
Owen, who's also he works on the Starfinder team, but back then he wrote the book on Absalom, and there's the Minotaur Prince of Absalom, which is this albino Minotaur named Prince Nuar.
Yeah.
And so his name became the name of the Minotaur race in Starfinder that are kind of like, not quite sure what the connection is because the gap gives us that big separation that nobody remembers, but that's certainly the behind the scenes thing of how the Nuars ended up on Absalom Station.
I think they probably needed someone to help build the Absalom Station corridors that are all maze-like and the ghost levels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So who better than to sort of bring a Minotaur up, and then he had offspring, I guess, and thousands of years later, here we are.
Indeed.
And you can do a smash cut of this afterward where it's like the gap.
Fair enough.
Fair warning.
Jumping over to Eox for a little bit, and the weapons that destroyed that planet initially, are there perhaps dormant ones still on the planet that could be found?
Depends on who's asking, I'm sure.
Yeah, right. Who do you work for?
And how much are you willing to pay?
I mean, a planet is a very big place. I would think, though, that the Eoxians, so they used their weapon to destroy the two neighboring planets, the twins that became the Diaspora, and the backlash almost broke Eox and really did mess it up quite a bit. I would imagine if there was still some of those weapons left, the Eoxians would have used them again since then. So probably there are not any of that. Although the Corpse Fleet, which is the sort of renegade navy of Eox, they've probably developed all sorts of weapons, and they could very easily have something like that up their pocket, in their pockets.
There may have been
sleeves.
some leftover schematics from centuries and millennia ago somewhere that someone has that maybe can be. By the way, I have to point out that this is also probably and when we go back from this, we'll be like, people have some really good questions. Let's write those down for adventure ideas.
Thank you.
So now with 2nd edition Pathfinder coming out, and goblins are now a core race. They are not a core race in Starfinder. I'm wondering, are you guys going to start writing in good goblins into the Pact worlds and making part of the society, or are they still going to be considered more of an outsider?
So I'm just going to say we kind of did it first with Space Goblins. We gave them playable racial traits right out the bat.
Before the game was even out, actually.
Yeah, that's true.
The Free RPG Day, First Contact bestiary.
That's a good point, yeah. So they were just biting our style, clearly.
Obviously.
But Space Goblins are slightly different from regular goblins, I guess. And so that they're...
It's harder to set things on fire.
That's true. They do like laser beams, though. So for the fact of the matter is they're out there. We talk about them being sort of pests in Absalom Station, but there's also, since you can play them as anybody, PCs will have good goblins or what have you running out all over the place. We might come up with a colony of something like that shows up of space goblins who have done something who are not considered crazy and evil. But for the most part, we did it for everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, we certainly aren't going to change things dramatically at this point just to match 2nd edition, because they are two separate games. And again, with the gap, which we keep talking about, is also, besides its place in story, it also kind of gives us a dividing line between anything that happens in Pathfinder and Starfinder. And so, I mean, obviously people can bring goblins more into their game, and, we're not doing any sort of, other new edition of Starfinder or anything like that, but in the future we could possibly revisit that. But Starfinder's a lot more based on 1st edition Pathfinder, or at least the sort of stuff that was created in that. So no real plans to do anything to match what second edition is doing at this point.
All right, next question. Just backstory. I've been talking to people on Twitch about my challenges about how I need bifocals in my glasses, and I've been, like taking off my glasses and looking at my phone. And so the suggestion was that I increased the size of the font on my phone. So I tried to do that and then lost like all the chats on my phone. So Param, in his genius ways, has now magnified the questions and turned it around so I can actually see the questions from here, and the rest of the room can now see the questions from Twitch as well, which is actually a happy accident. I love it. So now this is not in order of the questions in which people posted them. I have to go with what's relatively fresh at the moment. We will scroll back up, but for now the question is: many of the core rulebook races seem to have a patron deity in Starfinder. Who would the Skittermanders consider to be their patron deity, if any?
So when working on the Free RPG Day stuff, I kind of had to flesh out a little more about what Skittermander society is and culture and whatnot. And it's just little dribs and drabs. And one of the things I talk about, especially the Skittermander pre-gen, that is one of the mystic. Whose name I can't remember all of a sudden. I can remember the other three, but is a mystic of Ibra, the inscrutable. And I kind of sort of worked it in that Skittermanders kind of like to look at the stars and like to draw patterns in the stars, and Ibra is a little bit a god of constellations in a lot of ways. So that's not quite their patron deity, but it might be something that they a large percentage. And when we maybe write more about Skittermander culture, that might change.
I mean, Talavet's the patron god of the Kasatha, and Kasathas have 4 arms.
So
Skittermanders have 6 arms.
Is it
that
Talavet
could be
then?
maybe they may like the multi-armed gods. That could be something. Yeah.
I mean, Talavet is also community and stuff like that. That seems like that would be a big thing for Skittermanders as well.
Very helpful community coming together and that sort of thing.
You know, this new setup means that audience members could just steal Twitch questions.
Right?
Totally my question.
Exactly. Although they'll know it.
Twitch will know.
So this one's a softball. Will there be a Starfinder something for Free RPG Day this year?
Oh, definitely. We've already announced it. It's Skitter Crash, and the next line of the Skittermanders have a bunch of fun doing things line of Free RPG Day adventures. That's the full official name.
Yeah, it's a really long title.
Yeah.
And does the knowledge of the technology that destroyed Eox still exist?
We sort of got into that a little bit.
Yeah?
So yes and no, maybe.
Yeah. Mostly not, unless the corpse.
Secret
has
Tales, that world.
Where did Apostate come from?
That is one of the big mysteries, because Apostate has been. So for people who aren't familiar with everything, the solar system that Starfinder is set in was originally developed for Pathfinder in a book called Distant Worlds, and so except for Absalom Station, because that came out in Starfinder. But Apostate was around in Pathfinder times, and it is not a naturally occurring satellite of the sun, so it came from somewhere else, but that is one of the big mysteries of both Pathfinder and Starfinder, so we're probably not going to say, unless anybody has theories they want to share.
We do sort of hint at it. People think that it might be a big spaceship of some kind, but people don't really know where it came from. So it's tricky.
All right. This question's, I scrolled back up. This one's a little deeper. In Dead Sun's Book 1, Incident at Absalom Station, the back matter on the station mentions 3 groups who could potentially be responsible for a recent assassination attempt on the current Primex, Kumara Melacruz.
Mm-hmm.
2 of those suspects are the 6-Tip Gang and the Strong Absalom movement. What can you tell us about these 2 groups?
That was much deeper.
It was very deep.
That's what I can tell.
Well, the Strong Absalom movement we have detailed to some extent in the core rulebook, which is a group that believes that Absalom Station, which replaced the planet of Galarian, is a place just for humans, and it should be just the human place. Most of the other inhabitants of Absalom Station, who are not human, do not agree with that, but they're kind of a not very nice, possibly terroristic organization that is
lot of humans would agree, right? Too probably.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
they're
No,
a definite
of course.
fringe group that is looked down upon by probably a lot of people.
Right. The Six Tips gang, we haven't done anything. I think it was more of just a name drop of, I mean, I forget the exact number of people offhand. It was like something like 10 million or 5 million or 1 million. I don't know. There's at least 1 million in there. So it's, it's probably some kind of local gang. Sometimes we just kind of, like name drop things, and then they're adventure seeds that GMs can take and kind of develop and flesh out for their own campaigns.
Or that we take.
Yes.
And we will also,
Yeah.
then we're like, we've never done anything with that, so who knows? There may be a Six Tips gang
6 tips,
AP.
6 AP volumes.
6 tips. Name the 6 tips. The 6 tips gang kind of sounds like a Yosoki gang to me, and I don't know why.
I think it's a 5 point.
Yeah.
Thing, but, yeah.
But there's lots of street gangs on Absalom Station, so there's lots of areas where gangs hang out. So
2 in that volume alone, right?
yeah, exactly.
So, in some shows I've watched about the search for extraterrestrial life, they discuss the possibility of life inside moons like Europa or Enceladus. Is there any in Starfinder setting where you have a colony or aliens or whatever develop in that environment where it's basically, the ocean underneath the surface of a frozen moon?
Yes.
A couple.
Yeah, we do have a couple. Do you want to say
Nope.
one? Okay, fair enough. There is a frozen moon-like object in the diaspora called Nissus, or Nisus. I think Nissus sounds better to me. It has a frozen outer core and then sort of inner cities, and it actually doesn't. Who live there are Sarcesians who are not aquatic in any way, but they just live in these bubble cities that sort of adhere to the inside surface of the frozen moon. And that frozen ball of water is actually the source of the river between, that big river that flows through the diaspora. So that's one that I can think of off the top of my head. Is Kalamahoy frozen-y, or is it just watery?
Don't remember.
And it's just watery.
Okay.
But of course, being a science fantasy setting, we can do even crazier stuff, and so we have lots of examples of even crazier stuff than just people living under a frozen ice in some kind of ocean. I mean, we've got planets held together by energy fields and planets that share their atmospheres every once in a while. Planets that aren't planets at all, but are possibly giant embryos of great old ones. It's just your bog standard planets that you find around the galaxy.
Including bog planets.
Bog planets.
We've got a lot of little questions here. If you could add one race as playable that hasn't been made playable yet, which one would it be?
Platyparians.
That would be a whole new one. I don't have one. I feel like everything
That could be
I
is.
want, I get.
That was going to be my answer.
Everything Rob wants, I get. No.
It's true because we do just put them in.
Yeah, we put so many
Right.
in.
And are there? Yeah. Any of
Not,
that?
not in particular. It's no.
Are there plans for more info on Hib and the Bantrid?
Oh,
That is one of mine.
Yeah.
I was just talking about it in the last panel about in the art of Starfinder about they're like, is there like a favorite alien? The art of it, like it's the Bantrids.
Do we have any? We don't have any plans at the moment, but I would hope that if there were plans, someone would talk to me.
Describe a Bantrid.
A Bantrid look like a nose. No, it is it is a cone kind of shaped alien with a wheelie bottom, trackball bottom. What do we call them? Foot orbs.
Foot orbs, yeah.
And they roll around, and they have little sort of sea slug-like fins along their face.
Those are their arms.
Those are their arms, exactly. Yeah, and their appendages, and they can move stuff. And they were sort of Hib, I believe, is Brethida, one of the tiny moons of Brethida, and they just sort of came out of the out of some stasis, and they're like, "Hey, what's up, everybody? What's going on?" And all of their, with the gap, all their records are gone, so they don't know where they came from really themselves. But they're just out there, maybe making friends, hopefully.
Yeah, I can see we don't have any plans specifically for Hib or the Bantrids because that was in Pact Worlds, which was our campaign setting for the Pact Worlds. But I could see like if we did an adventure path set on Brethida or something, it depending on what that would be, we could have it go to HIB, and there might be something more like in a back matter article.
Yeah.
That'd probably where it would be if we did it, but no plans at this point. I don't
We
know.
have so many sort of like lots of little elements, and as you were saying earlier in the AP Q&A, our universe is so big that we kind of actually can almost never get to all of it. So even if something we drop like and that we're all kind of excited about, like Bantrids and HIB, we may not ever get there because we're doing a million other things. Sorry. I'm as sad as you are.
I get a question for I joined a Pact World book. Is there plans to come up with detailed booklets for each individual world, more detailed? Because it's kind of overgeneralized each world.
Right.
So I was hoping for like more detail, more background, more maps, more stories behind the worlds themselves. And how does distant worlds fit into a Starfinder, or doesn't at all?
All right, so the first question, which is, I'm just.
Are we going to go in? And we're going to have a Breath of the book, a Eox book.
So we have Starfinder has been out for less than 2 years now. Like Jason was just saying, we've got such a huge galaxy. So Pact World's expanded on the information that was given in the core rulebook, of course, and everybody wants more. But if we do a big dive on a planet, I mean, we have our setting is kind of loosely divided into 3 spheres almost. You have the Pact Worlds, that's the central thing. Then you have Near Space and the Vast, and we haven't even done anything about those yet. So with our current production schedule, it's probably unlikely that we're going to do a book specifically on a planet, because out of all the planets, I mean, some people might be interested in that, but other people wouldn't. You know, if the game grows and we get more and can do more books and stuff, then we might start looking at that and be able to take those sort of deeper dives. At this point, we don't have, because we pretty much have the adventure path and then the big rule books, or the big hardback books every year, and that's the main thrust of our products.
What we have done though is, and we'll probably see some more in the future, is slightly more granular, like in an Adventure Path book. So far we've seen a detailed gazetteer of the city of Kuvakara on Verces, and that's just one city on this gigantic planet. We might get a future, like some different Absalom Station, for instance, which did get an article which is about the same size as the article that it got in Pact World, but I can't. Did we do anything else?
Burning Heart.
Yeah, bits of the Burning Archipelago, exactly. Yeah, the Dawn of Flame. So we're gonna have those will get peppered in probably as we need them and as they fit into the adventure path. But yeah,
So
basically.
Yeah,
we got to grab what we grab and fit what we can fit where we can fit it, and that's the nature of the reality. There was a second question, and I forgot.
The distant worlds.
Oh yeah, how does Distant World fit in? Yeah.
So does it fit in Starfinder, or does it not fit in there, or?
It's really more the inspiration, because that was our original creative director for Starfinder, James Sutter, wrote that book for Pathfinder, and so that kind of became, and then when Starfinder was like, well, let's set it in the same solar system. And so what we did when we were first working on the game was look at distant worlds and say, what do we want to change and update for Starfinder? You know, like how has the future changed? So a good example of that is on the world of Aposte, which may or may not be a giant ship. It had these aliens in distant worlds in Pathfinder called the Ilee that had all sorts of different forms. Well, by the time we get to Starfinder, the Ilee are no longer there, and the Drow now control most of Aposte. So that's one of the changes that we did. You could certainly go back and look at distant worlds and sort of incorporate some of that into your game, but we kind of kept the pieces we wanted and changed the other things to make it different from Pathfinder. So, because that was really written for Pathfinder and for Pathfinder characters that might somehow visit these planets. But certainly the original inspirations for everything are in there.
Distant World is almost like a history book for the Starfinder.
Yeah.
Bits of the Starfinder.
Because that's all pre-GAP.
Yeah,
that's all the sort of ancient history of the solar system. So that's the kind of stuff that you could bring in, as this is what they used to be.
I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thank you.
There's a series of just questions and comments about Triaxis and what season it is and where the planets are in their orbit at any given moment. You know, I think so that might, how much of this is canon, is locked in? Do you want homebrew players to be able to pick the orbit of a planet at any given time? How do you guys feel about where planets are in their orbits and what seasons they're in?
A lot of our rules provide for the glossing over of that for those who are not interested in the exact orbits and working out, trajectories and slingshotting around various planets and spending probably several sessions over the course of months.
Raise your hand if you're an astrophysicist sitting here.
Yeah, right.
No, okay.
So like drift travel or even non-drift travel within a system is a die roll, in part to account for the fact that sometimes the planets will be here and sometimes they'll be on opposite ends of their solar system. So that's my answer to that.
That's a good answer.
Triaxis is in winter. We have established that, although the Riforians, the native, or one of the native sapient races of Triaxis, they used to be winter-born and summer-born. Now they still are, but they can choose which one they want to be. Even though Triaxis is in winter, there's nothing like gene therapies and that kind of stuff that they can be. I want to be summer-born because this is the future. So. We know that Triaxis is in its winter, but where exactly? I mean, its orbit is so different from everyone else's, and I'm pretty sure is in the real universe actually impossible to function that way. But in a science fantasy universe, anything is possible.
And I would say, for your home game, you can always do whatever you want in your home game. We don't. We don't care what you.
I care deeply. I want you to be happy.
Yes, we want you to be happy. That's what we care about. That's a good point.
And even beyond like planetary orbits, just with everything else, that's why we divided the setting into near space and the vast, and it's based on the density of drift beacons, not any actual distances, because trying to map out every single star in a galaxy would be a fool's errand, to say the least. And so it's not about how far something is, but about how easy it is to get to. And so it's not like the near space and vast are not like a physical map of the relationship of things. And that's, again, to kind of get away from, we just want to tell fun stories and everything, and we're not scientists that can actually figure that out.
Back off.
And real scientists would say, that's wrong, so,
The same is true for communication, too. That's built into the game, too. Communication uses the same rules, basically, as travel, so.
Cool.
So I was just curious about the More Lamont, if it was going to make its way into a source book at all.
I would say pay attention to the preview banquet tonight.
Yeah, come on by.
And prepare to be disappointed. I wouldn't do that.
You could have decided it specifically says there will never be a More Lamont in any core product.
As long as I live.
Anything about any future plans to talk about the Veskarium? Yeah?
Well, the Veskarium, as I mentioned, we've got so the Vesk are a core race.
Yeah.
In the core rulebook, who are not from the Pact worlds. They're the only core race that's not from the Pact worlds.
Sharon. And Kasatha. Well,
but they're there now. But you're right. You're right.
It's
so are the Vesk, but the Vesk. I mean, the Sharon don't have the Sharon. The Kasathas do, but it's way far away. But like I said, with the Pact worlds and near space and the vast, we kind of have three pieces of the setting, and the Veskarium is located in one of those pieces. So
specifically near space.
Specifically near space. So nothing official to announce, but things. It would seem to make sense to go there sometime.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
So obviously there's a lot of really good sci-fi out right now, in all forms of media. It's a good time to be a nerd. How much of what you guys see in other media influences things you do with Starfinder? Do you avoid ideas because you don't want to copy? Do you think, oh, that's cool, we should incorporate some elements? Or do you kind of develop Starfinder in a vacuum where you just have your plan and you just go with it?
Vacuum of space. The core rulebook has a big list of inspirations that we cop to immediately. Hey, we are not in a vacuum.
As does the beginner box too. The beginner box has a bunch of
a shorter list.
Yeah.
In keeping with the theme of that product. But yeah, all of it, I think, is the answer to everything we see. I think inspires us in some way. Obviously, we never want to copy, but there's a lot of great ideas, and they make us think of even cooler, not necessarily cooler, but other ideas that are also cool.
Yeah, I think it would be practically impossible to live in the society that we live in today and not take in any sci-fi as the nerds that we particularly are, and not be able to work in a vacuum. It'd be really hard.
Yeah.
for me, it's a huge influence, definitely, because I've always been a big sci-fi fan. And when I was working on Pathfinder, I'm also a big history buff. And so in Pathfinder, I take a lot of historical things to use as inspiration. Now with Starfinder, I can take like sci-fi and historical stuff and blend them together. And like Joe said, I mean, we don't want to do the exact same things, but there's so many inspirations, and I love so much stuff in science fiction that trying to find ways to do similar things or something is a lot of that comes into it, I think.
A question from Twitch about the elf gates and how they're connected to some of the planets and worlds of the system. Are they used to travel outside of the solar system? Are there plans to map out a network? Or expanding that concept in general?
So we have certainly, the elf gates were built by, what are they called?
Elves?
Elves, yeah. Elves built the elf gates. They're from Castrovel. Most of what we've talked about has either been on a single planet, like on Castrovel, or within the same solar system. But there's also been a few that go places that no one knows where it goes, or that are not active. So a lot of those are kind of things we've dropped that GMs can play with if they want. There's also a lot of stuff that was lost in the gap. So they certainly could, although we haven't really talked about like elves really going farther out. There could also be portals that aren't elf gates that were built by other people, though, that connect things.
Portals are a big theme sometimes.
Yeah.
Do each one of you have a favorite secret of the Pact worlds? That's the open-ended question.
Yeah, we were talking about this before we started, and we all kind of looked at each other and going, is there something we would definitely want to say?
We said them right at the beginning.
And we said them at the beginning.
Pronounce.
How to pronounce those planets. But for reals, do we have any? Do you have anybody?
I like the first ones of Avalon. I think there's a lot of cool stuff there. In the Dawn of Flame Adventure Path volume that I wrote, there's some interaction with them that I think is pretty cool. It's always kind of an interesting trick, like when you play through an AP and it would have an effect on this setting. Does that really happen in the setting? You know, that's something that I think there have been panels about here at Paizo for Pathfinder 2nd edition. Like, what happened? What was the result of the whirlwind in the end? So I don't want to say too much about it, and I don't know that it will have ripple effects necessarily. But that's one of the most interesting things to me.
One of the things that's on my mind a lot lately is the Swarm. And we go ahead and say things, at least in the core rulebook, is like, we know the Swarm is a thing. The Shirin used to be part of the Swarm. The Shirin ended up in the Pact Worlds in 83 years after the gap. What happened during that 83 years? It actually gets a little bit described in the upcoming Attack of the Swarm Adventure Path, and where they went and who they met and what happened to the Shirin a bit before they got to the Pact Worlds with their dire warnings. The Swarm's right behind us, maybe. And then eventually how they maybe got a little integrated with the Pact Worlds. But that was an interesting thing to think about, like, because we hadn't really thought about it and just sort of, hey, let's now detail it out. So keep an eye out.
Did the Shirin lead the Swarm to the Pact Worlds?
No, some people aren't. That's a bit of a maybe yes, maybe no kind of situation. But it's always sort of like the Shirin are always afraid that the Swarm are after them, and they a little bit are.
For me, it's this is a little bit beyond the Pact Worlds, but using Pact Worlds as the broad name for our setting. In the first adventure path, Dead Suns, we talk about these two ancient alien races who lived millions of years ago that were super advanced starfaring things, and they're not. They have a little bit of a role to play, but I'd like to. There's some other stuff to do with them, because really ancient alien civilizations and what they've left behind is kind of a fun secret to play with. So I'm interested in seeing about that in the future. I hope.
Little questions. Is there a debt collector organization in Pact Worlds that's been established?
Oh, the Knee Breakers.
The Knee Breakers.
Probably many.
Yeah,
Many,
I imagine there has
nothing,
to be. Yeah.
Nothing specific.
Nothing that specific that we've given a name to, I don't think.
I could imagine Abadar Corp having a department.
Department of Knee Breaking.
I think
No,
maybe,
probably
I think
a
that might have
department
come
of,
up in
Of
Twitch.
collections.
Department of Collections.
Yeah,
I could
that would
see
make
that.
sense.
How about, are there any known groups that are against drift travel?
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit, I think, in the Drift article. That because you are definitely ripping a part of another plane into the Drift when you travel using a Drift engine. There are some conscientious objectors who, you're taking the risk that you're ripping half of someone's house into the drift,
Or more unfortunately, that person.
or half of the person.
Half of that person, yeah. I can't. Did they have a name? Do you remember, Joe?
I don't remember.
Okay,
Jason,
I can't
thanks
remember
for
either.
asking.
Sorry, you wrote that, so
Yeah,
I was
a long
hoping,
time
and
ago.
that was a
The
long
Gap,
time
the
ago.
Gap.
The Gap has it's okay.
There's also some groups that have developed their own type of starship drives, like particularly planar drives. The Church of Sarenrae has some, I believe, like the Zon-Kuthon has shadow drives, and so I think a lot of those people, because they use sort of this proprietary magic or proprietary technology, it's not so much that they're opposed to drift travel as that they just have a thing that they use that they prefer better that serves their needs.
Cool. Oh my gosh, do we have any more questions? Otherwise,
I'm trying to like compile them. There's a couple of questions about. I'm gonna get this name wrong. Demoratosh.
yeah,
You got it right,
you
exactly
got it right. 100%.
Current domain. Hell. I'm not sure of this plot line myself. So.
Oh, where does Demoratosh live?
reside?
Where does the god Demoratosh live?
Well, he is lawful evil, which would tend to be one of the things we have. We haven't done a whole lot of stuff with the planes. Probably the most we've done on the planes would be the drift and the shadow plane.
And Plane of Fire.
And the Plane of
a couple
Fire
months
now.
coming up.
Yeah, or we
We'll-
will soon.
we'll have an
So
article about it.
we haven't really gone into like where each god lives in the multiverse because we haven't really expanded into that yet. I mean, if for your game, if you wanted to say hell because he's lawful evil, that could work, but it doesn't have to be what it would be. I could even see like Axis maybe. But that's something. It's not like we have like a whole bunch of secrets. We just have this list of things that we're waiting to publish. We're trying to work on the stuff we are publishing, and so at the time it comes to, that's when we decide those sorts of things.
Yeah, and we'll if it's important, something big and important like that, it is something that we do often discuss. At least bring it to Rob and be like, "Hey, Rob, what do you think?" And so. Yeah, it's not doing this. Hopefully, not just pulling the stuff completely out of the thin air.
Yeah.
Anyone? Okay, there's more. This is a little out of my knowledge, but where's the best place to find Afrofuturism in the Pact world? Maybe inspired by the Black Panther and all that tech?
Oh, no.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that.
I don't have a good answer for that yet.
Okay.
Anywhere you want it to be, kind of. We have yet to sort of sit down and like take the. Although I think at some point those ships that they have in the Black Panther, I was like, I want starships that do this and look like this, and we sort of have like maybe one that's mildly mechanical, but we haven't yet fully pushed that inspiration.
Room for development there.
Room for development.
Yeah.
100%.
And that might be a couple of people who wanted that answer, so great. How large are the various Pact worlds' fleets? That's kind of specific, but.
Yeah, that's
As big as you need them to be? You know?
Yeah, very big.
Yeah, I mean, we've made some references to some of the fleets, like the Corpse fleet that left. That was mainly Eox, or most of Eox's navy. Probably Eox has built it up since then. But since we haven't done a whole lot of stuff with like fleets, there's really not been a thing of like they have X number of ships and everything, because that's a level of detail that's not necessarily important. I mean, if people are interested in that, sure, but it's something that it can kind of be whatever you want it to be. I mean, we've got some guidelines that the combined Pact Worlds and Veskarium fleets were able to drive off the swarm, so you can assume they were pretty big.
You talk about the armada around Absalom Station kind of being big enough to drive off.
Yeah.
To make it non-obvious, like, oh, the fleet can just come and take Absalom Station.
Exactly.
Here's a super specific one.
We're good at those.
Right?
Yeah,
There's some really open-ended ones. There's some really specific ones. With Absalom Station being a major drift exit, how often does a chunk of another plane get pulled into the Pact system? And do the stewards have a contingency plan in place to deal with this?
So that's not how that works exactly. Okay. Because the bits of the other plane get pulled into the drift. We have yet to see stuff come out of the drift, with the minor exceptions. No. How did the drift rod come out?
They towed it out.
They towed it. So you can pull things
yeah.
out of the drift using drift energy, but it comes with your ship.
But that was also a piece from a demi-plane.
Right, it came into the drift, but it got out of the drift.
The worst problem would be somebody goes into the drift and it takes a piece of the material plane that includes Absalom Station. That would be bad if it went that way. Or
any part of any Pact
really
worlds. Cool. Also that.
Speaking of that possibility, are there any groups or people in the Pact worlds that may be trying to weaponize that ability to pull stuff into the drift that isn't necessarily for the use of movement, but for, oh, hey, this part of the planet, I don't like them. Let's put them in the drift.
Yeah.
There have to be people researching how to control that random process, right?
Yeah.
And even just figure out why it's happening. Like that's still something. That
But is it random?
yeah, exactly, Yeah.
Sorry.
No. I mean, drift travel's only been around for a little bit over 300 years when Triune, the new god Triune, who no one had really heard of before, said, check it out, faster than light travel.
We'll take it.
And so I think that, you're dealing with something that a god basically put into place, or possibly even the god just discovered. That's another one of the big mysteries is, did Triune create the drift, or did Triune discover the drift? And so it's probably very hard to weaponize that because no one's really sure how it works.
We were just fairly recently banding about thoughts about something like that for future, but it didn't make it onto the. It's on again, and we talked about this at the Starfinder Adventure Path thing. The list of adventure ideas.
But the Church of Triune also feels a sense of ownership over the drift, and they certainly would probably not want people to do that, I would think. So.
There will be no event horizon or not.
That's what shadow drives do, actually. Shadow drives are totally event horizon nonsense.
Are there any other churches that have big old navies in your minds?
Iomade definitely does,
Yeah.
because they've got a bunch of crusades. I mean, we haven't gone too much. Triune, we haven't even said has like a navy of any sort.
They probably have ships because the clerics go out and put the drift beacons in place, so they have to have some kind of space travel.
Yeah.
But they probably don't have a massive army navy type thing.
I could see the Church of Demoritosh having some ships. I mean, the Veskarium obviously has ships. I could see the Church of Demoritosh having some of their own ships too. Yeah.
From the previous session, the art on the Drift Dead got me wondering: is it possible, like, to have a techno-magical option for capturing the soul, so you could bring it back instead of it going, drifting away, kind of like an emergency, life preserver, like grab man overboard, grab it.
They're called androids.
Just cram this soul into an android body.
There could be. Yeah, we haven't done a whole lot with souls, but I don't. But it's. I mean, you could be. I mean, we haven't done anything like that. I don't think.
No, metaphysically, the River of Soul still works the same general way as it does in Pathfinder, if you're familiar with that. And we still have resurrect and or raise dead or reincarnate. So the spells kind of, but not so a good techno-magical way to sort of unflatline somebody.
We haven't done night hags yet in Starfinder, have we?
No, we have not.
Yeah.
Not yet, maybe.
There's a rejuvenation table, right? But that's just straight tech.
Yeah.
Or is it restoration
Oh,
table?
yeah.
But that is not technology.
But I could see like night hags, in the future updating to not just a magical thing, but a techno-magical thing to sort of to steal souls and trade them on their own. That's separate from the river.
How about clones as a player race, or maybe a heritage for any race? Is that in the status of that?
That is a very interesting thing.
But wouldn't a clone of a Sheeran just be a Sheeran, right? It's
Sure, I mean, was it clone of a human just a human? Now we get into some real deep nonsense. Just keep your eye on the horizon.
There may be some clones coming. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's actually a little bit talk of there's a clone army of sorts mentioned in the Absalom Station. There's like a weird, I can't remember what the name of it is, but there's like a group of people who are all a clone of one person.
Yes.
And that's
an
army
is a bit much.
Yeah,
yes.
Not army. I was.
And I'm seeing the art, and it's the same thing. I'm totally blanking on their name again.
Yeah,
It exists.
It exists. Something about it exists. If you look at the Absalom Station article, you'll see something.
Suddenly remember it at the.
Yeah, right later. In the middle of your banquet speech, you'll be like,
"That's them." I can also look at my book then when I.
There are lots of questions still, so they keep on coming. We're at almost 5 o'clock, so I think we've got maybe 10 minutes at most. Are there any plans to do an anti-hero / criminal underworld / bounty hunter / pirate AP where the players are not working for the established governments? Something a little rebellious.
I like that as the name of an AP.
We don't have anything currently on the horizon.
I think pirates are on the list. Though.
Pirates are on the list.
We
right?
do have this big list. Did we say? We just mentioned the list. We've talked about it in other panels of our AP ideas, and when it's time to outline the AP, we're like, let's go to the list, and we keep adding new ideas to it. But certainly, bounty hunters and space pirates are a big trope. So.
Yeah, there's an article about criminal organizations. It's just a smattering of them among the Pact Worlds and beyond. I
think it's number 15. I think it's number 15,
number 15,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that actually highlights some new criminal organizations and stuff. That's a cool article.
Is there any setting material coming up that will tie the new classes coming out in the upcoming operations manual to the setting in a strong way, such as a guild of witch warpers or a legion of vanguards?
So we have this thing that happens when we put out new stuff and new classes or maybe archetypes or whatever. They kind of like don't exist in the setting until they exist in a splat book or what have you, and then they get worked in. They usually get worked in sort of organically. If something comes up, like, oh, now we can reference the Vanguard class. Here's a class of Vanguards, and maybe somehow we can retcon a little bit, but we generally stay away from that. So and nothing planned exactly, but again, when it comes up organically and fits and is awesome, we make it happen.
Like this criminal organizations article, he was just talking about that. If we were writing that after character operations manual, we're like, oh, well, this is like a guild of vanguards, because now they'll be in the game. But obviously, we're working on that sort of stuff like character operations manual now, or haven't really gotten into that stuff. So probably they will come in there, but we don't have we got to get them in there right now because it is just more organic.
But I can think of characters and upcoming things that are those new classes, and that will.
Yeah, you might see them as NPCs and whatnot.
Definitely.
Eventually. Yeah.
Will we ever see any novels for the Starfinder universe?
I've got one right here.
We'd love to see some novels. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Could there ever be a microbot swarm class in Starfinder?
Well, a class?
A class.
It says class.
Yeah.
More
Swarm
of a playable
class.
species. It'd be cool. It'd be really cool to have a playable species that was a swarm. That would be neat.
That would be neat.
That would be neat.
I know that tone of voice. Let's see. Clones. How many planets are in the Vescarium? Is it a multi-system empire?
It is an 8-planet system.
There are 8 planets.
There are 8 planets. There are, like, the Pact worlds has things that are not planets, so might the Vescarium. I think they're pretty much, it's kind of, as a term, whether they're a multi-system, they're not multi-system in the same way that the Aslanti Star Empire is. They have multiple star systems. I think it's more similar to the Pact worlds, where it's really focused on one thing, and then there's colonies and things out, which are technically part of the thing, but not really the core.
How about Shaylin, the god? Any followers of her in the Pact worlds? There's something about talking about the shedding tears to make up the glaciers and dark side on Versus, and so I think there's some wanting to know just how.
Well, she's not one of the core 20 gods of Starfinder. But we've also said that if there's gods from Pathfinder that are not specifically mentioned, that it's not that these gods are gone or dead or whatever. It's just there's not a focus on them anymore. People have gone on to something else. Like, I guess beer is a lot more common in the future, so people don't worship Caden Kalian as much.
Seems like they'd worship him more if beer was more common.
Maybe.
But that's just me.
I don't know. You can't fly a space. You can't fly a starship and drink. So therefore,
not with that attitude.
But Shalyn has been mentioned that Kazan Kuthan is one of the core gods. That's her brother, and she's mentioned that she kind of went off beyond the realms of reality to find whatever changed him. So there probably are some worshipers, but her church is not nearly as big or as influential as it used to be.
To sort of pull behind the curtain a tiny bit, there is a place in the diaspora called Songbird Station, which at some point was sort of very much heavily more involved with being connected to Shellen, and then Rob was like, well, let's pull that back a little bit. So it's definitely inspired by Shellen and especially the music and arts part of her domain. So it's a big concert hall, by the way, in the diaspora.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
So with the way androids release their souls at the end of their lifespan when they want to give up their bodies for another soul to inhabit, what happens to that soul? Does it go to a sort of android cloud? And if that's the case,
watch yourself, counselor.
Through technological, magical means, would it be possible to introduce something to that cloud that could poison the entirety of the android?
I think Android souls sort of still function like it's still the river of souls. It'll get into there and it'll get mixed in with all the other souls and go down to the boneyard and so forth and so on. Although
that could be happening somewhere.
Yeah.
And that would be a cool story campaign hook.
Exactly.
But it's like there's not human souls or gnome souls or Vesk souls. It's souls are, and then after they go through the whole system, they end up in those bodies. And it's the same with androids. Is that they're not specifically android souls. Now, the one thing that does get reused is android bodies get reused, and new souls can be put into, or can appear into android bodies.
One of the great things about the chat going on here is that people occasionally ask questions and then other people start answering them on their behalf. So the questions get refined. So let me see if I can. The subject is about like mechs and mecha. And not so much power armor, because that's somewhat been discussed, but like the really big stuff, like vehicle-sized mech. Is it that part of your vision, or on the table? I guess that's the question.
Give us the Gundams.
We all know you want the Gundams.
Certainly on the table. We just haven't figured out the best time or place or way to do those.
I mean, I think there's personally, it sounds like AP material to me. If it's that,
put it in the core rule book. I mean, a core split.
It's book, like if it's that significant.
I mean, Owen Casey Stevens has a Gundam on his desk, so we are certainly aware of mechs.
So, okay, here's more of a cultural question about plans for the development for famous people of the Pact worlds, like historical figures or politics or bands or comedians or artists and sportsmen. I think there's a real thriving cultural development going on. How do you see that unfolding in books to come? It just integrated into everything else, or something standalone?
Yeah, I mean, strawberry machine cakes everywhere.
Right, but that was something that just organically happened. That was created for a Starfinder Society scenario, and it became really popular. And even grumpy old me was like, "That's awesome!"
Those are really great ways to just sprinkle details and make it feel like a lived-in universe. Like in the armory, there's a musical instrument, and in the art order, I just asked for a strawberry sticker on it. But they came up with a cool little logo for the strawberry machine cake, and it's not like anything, but if you know what it is, then it's cool, and otherwise it's not good.
I mean, you think about like pop culture just on the entirety of the planet Earth. We might be real versed about American pop culture, but there's European pop culture and Japanese pop culture, and Chinese pop culture, and all sorts of things that you might not know. You might see it on the internet, right? And so that's sort of like now expand that out to a universe, right? So we've got people like Zoe and Strawberry Machine Cake and stuff that we get glimpses of, and maybe we'll eventually introduce someone else a little bit here, and if that it sparks the imagination of y'all, well, maybe we'll see that person again. But I can imagine there's just again an ocean of this stuff that we can only every so often just get dribs and drabs out of.
All right, I think this will be the last question, unless somebody else in the room has one, and we'll just ask about what are the Terrasks of the planets of the Pact worlds? Who are the biggest, baddest monsters? There's one that somebody knows about that's a kaiju-like creature.
Yeah,
the Kyokor.
In Alien Archive 1.
I believe the tables in Alien Archive 1 for building your own creatures go up to CR 25.
They do.
And Alien Archive and Alien Archive 2 don't have anything above CR 20.
That sounds like there may be an Alien Archive after 2 that does.
Who can say?
Yeah.
Not anyone at this table.
Certainly the Kyokor is one big super kaiju thing that goes on that planet. We've got a couple of other, I think mostly coming to, that are big like planet devastating type monsters, which you will soon see. I don't think there's anything in 2 that's like that, because you were...
I don't think so.
Yeah. But coming soon, there will be some big planet devastating monsters just like that.
To devastate your planet, your home planets.
Coming to a planet near you. All right, and I guess we are out of time, so thanks everybody.
Thank you all.